Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. More of a weary start purely because I'm a bit weary. Anyone that might have seen me, because I know there were a few Spurs fans late, I was going to say last night, early hours this morning, trying to get away from the San Siro stadium. Yeah, doesn't help that the tubes stop at 12:01 at the outside the San Siro. So various fans either walking across. I know I spoke to some on the plane back this morning that had to walk pretty much across Milan to get back to their hotels. I think I managed it. I was there, so I know. I managed a combination of a tram that went across half of Milan, and then a taxi. But I didn't get into about 2 in the morning. And then I had to get up at 5 a.m. because I had to get a train to the airport. So that's why I look like this. And that's why I'm probably going to not make much sense in various parts of this video because my brain is not going to work. But I wanted to talk about the match, and I wanted to talk about the takeover talk as well that's been happening again today. It's another month, so it must be another Tottenham Hotspur finance-related story. But yeah, weird game. Negatives, positives. San Siro is amazing. Honestly, it's such a weird stadium because outside it's absolutely iconic. Inside, you can see why they're looking to make a new one. So I think they're demolishing it, aren't they, and putting a new one there. But it is just one of those old school places that if you get the chance to go there before it, is no more, you really, really should. 74,000 there last night. I got the number here somewhere. 74,320. I must be honest, I didn't realise it held that many. I don't know where I'd got it in my head that it was slightly smaller, but my goodness. And it was noisy. It was classic European fare. When the goalkeepers even come out. So you've got poor Brandon Austin and Alfie Whiteman getting booed mercilessly by about 70,000 Milan fans. And the Spurs fans were out in their droves. 4,200, more than 4,200 made the trip out of there. I feel like I saw most of them in the days leading up to it. And even flying out on, when did I go? Monday morning. I saw loads of them from Stansted. All brilliant people. Honestly, I'm very, very fortunate that I always have really great interactions with Spurs fans. I'm very, very lucky. Always very good entertainment. Always have good chats with them. And they kind of tell me about their stories and what I've done. It's lovely to know because I absolutely am aware that I'm very privileged in my job, that I'm kind of ushered in, all for free. I go to, the press stand, I get a good view and all of this sort of stuff. Whereas I know the Spurs fans, they're up there in the gods, especially at the San Siro. You are right up there. So it's lovely to kind of get a bit of grounding, I suppose, and understand exactly what the fans' trip is like, how sometimes they're bust in and out and stuff like that. And I've been very, very fortunate. I haven't actually had a rubbish encounter with a Spurs fan in the real world. It's just only on social media once in a while they were a bit unpleasant, but you can just block them. Which probably means now that someone is going to make it a point of coming up to me and being unpleasant. I've probably absolutely queued up that moment. But no, I'm very lucky. And honestly, please do come and say hello, people, because I always really enjoy it. It's always a really nice experience as well. Away days, home days, it's always not at my home matches. It's always good fun. But the match. Let's start with the match. We've got loads of different stuff to get through tonight. I'm going to try not to make it another hour and a half video because I've had 3 hours sleep, and mainly, and also because nobody really needs an hour and a half video from me. I'm sure of it. Look, if I'm Antonio Conte, I'm probably looking at last night and I'm thinking, do you know what? It could have been worse. And we go with a 1-0 deficit to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in front of what will be a sellout, great atmosphere. It's doable. I think that's the way he'll be looking at that. Personally, a defeat's never a good thing. And there were a lot of disappointing elements I felt to last night. but I did feel it's really difficult because I don't want to make it in any way sound like a defeat is a good thing, because it isn't. It really wasn't. But what I would say is, in the context of the week that preceded the awful performance at Leicester, losing Lloris, Bentancur, obviously we now know has been confirmed as an ACL rupture. Bissouma, he's going to be out for around 8 weeks, and it could potentially be worse if there's a kind of a healing period as well, and you never know with these little kind of stress fracture injuries as well. And then Cess is at least 6 weeks. So in the context of all of that, and Conte coming back and still not being himself, I'll tell you later about, he's actually fitted, or he has been fitted with a device on his stomach. We're talking about a guy that is very much impaired. So in the context of all of that, and having a 20-year-old and a 22-year-old in your midfield, in the centre of midfield, in the San Siro, 74,000 people absolutely piling the pressure on these two young men in the middle of the pitch, I felt there were periods of the game where, certainly as journalists, we were turning to each other and saying, do you know what, they're not doing too bad. But I wouldn't extend that to the attackers. I wouldn't say that. I don't think the attackers do it. And I think that was the key thing. And obviously, conceding another early goal. Come on. But, like I say, trying to see it from the view of those 4,200 Spurs fans that are up there in the gods. Saw a lot of them down around the canals of Milan. Not going up and down them, but walking alongside them. And around Duomo as well, the main cathedral. And, I'm trying to look through it through their eyes, and I think going all that way, did they get the entertainment they really required? Absolutely not. Did they get the performances from their big players? Absolutely not. Did they get to see two young central midfielders absolutely step onto the Champions League stage and grab that opportunity? I think they did. And I think from talking to a lot of them and at the airport today, I think that's the positive a lot of them will take from it. And I think, personally, I would love to be able in years to come to say, oh yeah, I was there that night in the San Siro when, Pape Matar and Oliver Skipp, that was the real moment where you thought, oh, hello, they're going to be, they can really, really can do this. So there's that. But yes, 1-0, not enough. Not at all. And the weird thing is the attacking area is, well, we're going to talk about it in a little bit more depth in a while, but the attacking area is the one area where the injuries haven't affected Spurs. Conte has loads of attacking options. So for that to be the area that looked a bit kind of knackered and limp and not particularly great, that shouldn't be the case. And we'll kind of delve into the reasons why and why not. But the other aspect of this as well is that we mustn't forget, and I said this kind of leading into the game, that they were up against a Milan side that on Friday night they beat Torino. I still don't understand why it's only foreign leagues that bring their games that little bit forward so that the Champions League team can have a bit more rest, but it's the Premier League for you. That before that Torino win, they hadn't won a game since January the 4th. They'd only taken 2 points from 15 in Serie A. So this is not a Milan team that's in a great place. They've got their own injuries. I mean, they had two kids in the back line as well. Two young defenders, 21-year-old and 22-year-old as well. So Spurs absolutely should have made more of it, taken more from the game. And I didn't realise that Spurs and Milan have only played each other 5 times. And this was the first time Spurs have lost to AC Milan. Spurs are 1-2, drawn 2. A little bit of trivia for you. I think gleaned that from somewhere of Spurs, one of their reports or something. I wasn't aware of that. But the goal. A single goal decided it. As is always the case when Spurs concede an early goal, it's normally a rubbish goal. It's not often early on they concede an absolute cracker and you think, oh, okay, fair play, there's nothing you can do about it. This one was... I've seen people trying to blame other defenders and the like. I'm sorry. It has to go down to Christian Romero for me, this one, really, as the bulk of the blame. He didn't have a good night at all. I'm going to talk a little bit about him as well as this goes on. But in terms of the goal, jumps up there. absolutely beaten in the air by a wing-back in Theo Hernandez, who then has the time, because Romero did this really clumsy kind of fell down on his backside, and Hernandez just kind of landed perfectly on his feet, ran on, had all the time in the world, and I think Dyer came across, and Hernandez, it did like a bit of a cross shot that hit Forster in the chest, I think it was. I don't think I've actually seen a replay of that goal yet. No, I have actually. I lie. I did see a replay. Hits Forster, and then the ball comes out. Brahim Diaz comes in, knocks the ball back towards goal, and absolutely, I don't think he got enough credit. I think some Spurs fans kind of noticed. I think someone told me that on the BT coverage, Glenn Hoddle picked it out. But the save from Forster, from the initial shot from Diaz, was fantastic. It was incredible reaction save. I was so impressed. I remember seeing, I think at the time, wow, how's he got his hand to that? And in the replay, I kind of did see, that's why I know there was a replay. It was brilliant, but it was just one of those unfortunate moments where the only place he could put it was where Diaz was running back in to follow up his own shot and kind of head it over the goal line. It's just it was unfortunate in that regard, but utterly avoidable before that. But then the problem was really Spurs huffed and puffed, and I'd say they maybe looked the more likely to get a goal until the latter moments than Milan, mainly from set pieces. Sonny, although he wasn't great on the night, he put in some really good kind of deliveries from set pieces, and they were a bit of worry. Dyer got on the end of a couple of them. But other than that, Cyprian Tatarusanu, if I pronounce that right, didn't really have much to do. I mean, don't get me wrong, Forster didn't really afterwards until who was it? Charles de Ketelaere and Malik Thor. Killing the pronunciation. They both had late headers that went right past the post. But Forster didn't actually have too many saves to make, and neither did the Milan keeper. Spurs had marginally more to possession, 53% to obviously 47%. And they had 12 shots compared to Milan's 9, with 3 on target compared to the host's 4. But like I say, Milan could have put it to bed at the end. I'd say even one of those goes in and it becomes a very difficult task at the Spurs stadium. And what am I thinking of? Late moments. Probably can only think of Richarlison got a bit of a barge over. It's one of those that you've seen them given, but on the whole, they're going to err towards not giving that sort of one. There was also another penalty I thought was a potential penalty shot when Harry Kane kind of got clocked in the face in the box. Real kind of the elbow. I can't remember who it was now. I might have been I'm not going to pronounce it. The Danish centre-back in the middle. I'm too tired to murder another pronunciation, although I already did. But yeah, got clocked in the face. And I kind of thought on that, every time I watched it back, I was like, oh, that was quite a kind of a flinging an arm backwards moment. But again, one of those that's not often given. But other than that, yeah, just not enough from Spurs going forward at all. Here's what I asked Conte at the start. I asked him about Sarr and Skipp, who we're going to go into a bit more detail in a second, and also about the performance. He said, as for the performance, I think it was a battle from the start until the end. I think we played against a team with a high intensity and a lot of pressure, and it was very difficult to play for us and difficult to play for them. It was a pity to concede a goal after 5 minutes because I felt in this specific situation we could have done much better. Then we tried. When you play against Milan, you have to pay attention when you attack to prevent the counter-attack because they have players like Leao and Theo Hernandez and also a point of reference like Giroud. If they have space, they can kill you. We're now talking about the first game for the qualification, and there are 2 games. I'm sure that in the second game in our stadium, I know that our fans will create an important atmosphere to push us to overcome the Milan obstacle. And then he said, I think my players have played with willingness. They're determined. They've been there. Conceding a goal after 5 minutes was really hard for us. The match was all downhill for Milan. After that goal, they could play with different characteristics, not with the typical ones. They have very good players like Leao, Hernandez and Giroud. When you make a pass, you hand the pass to Giroud. Giroud makes possession and he allows the team to attack. I'm not making reference to only Giroud. I'm making reference to the performance of the whole opponent. Yeah, Leao was very, very tricky. I wouldn't say... I don't know his goal tally, so I don't know how deadly he is in goal, but certainly in terms of his ability on the ball, Spurs really struggled to get near him, and when they did, it was often a foul. I was quite impressed with the way, his trickery especially. Hernandez was a real presence. Giroud was his usual kind of target man self. But this is one of those classic moments where I'm absolutely making sure it doesn't happen. But personally, if Spurs... I think at home, as long as they don't have any more serious injuries, which is a massive if when it comes to Tottenham, I think they should be able to be better against Milan, and I don't think Milan will be as they were at home away. I mean, that's obvious, but I think it will be a game they should still win. Whether they will is another thing, but I would say they should. The other thing I just wanted to point out there, and it's probably something I'm going to come a little bit back to when we talk about Conte, but when he mentioned there about, I always feel he's too worried about the opposition at times. Saying about, where is it? When you play against Man, you have to pay attention when you attack to prevent the counter-attack. If you have the space, they can kill you. I get that, and I get that you've got to be certainly aware of the strengths of the other team. But I sometimes feel with Conte that he is almost too concerned with the strengths of the other team, and Spurs become slightly nullified because they almost become too compact and concentrating on defending than they do attacking. Sometimes, I wouldn't say all the time, but just sometimes. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's affected some of the attacking players. I don't know, maybe they're doing more of a defensive job, but we'll come to that because I've got some points to make on that as well. March the 8th, second leg. If they want to make the quarterfinals, they've got to be a lot better than they were last night. But two players who did very, very well were Pape Matar and Oliver Skipp. I was really happy because I did one of those tweets that can absolutely blow up in your face and you get all those people going, oh, this aged well. I said before the game, did a photo of the pitch, and I said, essentially, wouldn't it be wonderful if under all the pressure and everything, Pape Matar and Oliver Skipp really step up tonight, put in a wonderful display and give a real glimpse of what the future could look like for Tottenham. And some people are saying underneath, oh, you've jinxed them. Oh, people are going to say after this, they're all going to come back to this. And I'd hope people did, saying, oh, he was kind of right. Because they were, I'm going to go as far to say it, I thought they were magnificent. I did. In a team that was very, very average and some below average performances, I felt those two young men, 22 years old and 20 years old, went out there and they looked like they were born to play Champions League football. Look, I know that you could quite easily say, yes, it is a not so great Milan side, but Conte said it himself, I've got a quote in a bit when I asked him about them. You put many senior footballers, top footballers, Premier League footballers, in that San Siro, in that atmosphere, with the boos, with the whistles, with the noise and everything that you get there, and playing such a world-renowned team, you could easily choke or crumble there. Conte was only talking about players crumbling under the pressure the other day. These two young men, I sound like the Harry, young man. These two young men went out there and they just showed no fear whatsoever. They were so good. They weren't overwhelmed whatsoever. It could have gone either way. Honestly, they could have done that. They could have been absolutely overwhelmed and they could have really, really crumbled. And it would have been very detrimental to the development if they'd done that as well. But they didn't. They went absolutely the other way. And look, I thought Sarr was fantastic. I'd had him as marginally my man of the match. But I'd say Skippy wasn't far behind. I thought Sarr was getting a lot of praise, and rightly so. But I think we have to really look at how Skipp played alongside him as well. And do you know what I think made it even more impressive was that they were playing together. normally when you get a young player that everyone starts raving about they've played really well, it's because they've played alongside an experienced head, someone that guides them through the game. These two guys had to go out there and take on, an AC Milan side by themselves in the middle of the pitch, without any kind of experienced heads alongside them on the middle. I think the only thing that I could tell, actually, was Gary Jacobs from the Time, who noticed that Emerson occasionally was tucking inside just to make a three at time, almost a three, just to give them a little bit of support. But on the whole, they really did it for themselves. And what I understand, I've been told this by a couple of people around them, that they really enjoy playing together. In training, they pair up sometimes. They played against Portsmouth for the 90 minutes, didn't they, together in the FA Cup. They played briefly, maybe 10, 12 minutes, something like that as well, in a friendly against, I think it was Peterborough under 21s. But from what I understand, they just really kind of click on the pitch. They really enjoy playing with each other, or alongside each other. And I think that showed. You might agree. I thought it showed in their understanding of each other's games. I felt they complemented each other really well in the way they played. For two really young players, they were very disciplined in knowing when one had to go forward, the other had to cover and make sure they were back. And they were very good. Honestly, you wouldn't know that was Pape Matar Sarr's Champions League debut, and it was Oliver Skipp's full debut. Yeah, it was the first start he's made in the Champions League as well. So, yeah, super. I'd say the only thing missing, if I'm going to be ultra critical, was like penetrative passing in the final third. But I think that will come. I really do. I thought, that will come with confidence as well. But also, I would say Sarr, bear in mind he's 20. He's quite a happy, jolly character whenever you see him around the training ground. And I think I said in the last video, Højbjerg seems to have taken to him, like really always got his arm around him and stuff like that, have a bit of a joke. And Skippy really likes him as well. And he's just, I guess it's been such a night and day kind of experience for him, being at such a tough time at Met, struggling against relegation last season, a real battle, and then coming obviously to this big club, but not really being involved to begin with, just purely working on developing his game. And now kind of they're seeing that that's bearing all the fruit it really kind of they wanted. And we mustn't forget the Sarr, despite the fact he's only 20, he's got World Cup experience. Played in, it's quarterfinal, wasn't it, against England? It was quarterfinal. God, this is mad, isn't it? Feels like a long, long time ago, even though it was only a couple of months back. Quarterfinal with Senegal against England. He's played Africa Cup of Nations, won it's technically an Africa Cup of Nations winner, although he only got like a handful of minutes here and there. He's still, he has the experiences of big games, big stadiums, lots of fans, and he just was so confident. He was playing. I talk about the penetrative passes. I mean more in the final kind of third with those. But I would say he was doing a lot of that sort of stuff further back in the pitch, like around the centre circle. He's very intuitive, knowing where people are. It's like his radar, his inbuilt radar is very good. There are amount of times when he'd suddenly turn and just play a ball between two Milan players straight to a Spurs player. And what I mean about the penetrative passing is if he just did that a bit further up the pitch, I think he'd be the kind of player that could set up goals really well. We'll see if that's added to his game, because he has played as an attacking midfielder as well. He was, I'd say Skipp was the workhorse in terms of maybe taking on a little bit more of the defensive work, because he was mainly doing like pressing and harassing. He won 5 duels as well, not like duels in a game or something. Like Sonic Hedgehog was rings, wasn't it? Although I would say, to be fair, I'm kind of making that sound like it was only Skipp. It wasn't. Sarr did a lot of that as well. I think I've got some of the stats here. I'll get to those in a second. But yeah, I felt with Skipp, it was a little bit different in terms of with Sarr, I think the inbuilt confidence was there right from the early seconds of the game. He was very, very, very comfortable. Whereas with Skippy, I felt he needed there was a few strong challenges he went into and he won the ball back. And I think you could hear the roar from the Spurs fans up to our left, not right now, at the time. And I felt that when he did those, you just saw him growing and growing and get more and more confident. And I don't know if you remember, but against Preston he came on. He looked really bright. It was only a brief little cameo, but he looked really bright. He was setting stuff up as well for the attackers. And I felt he brought that into this game. And he was so good, his use of the ball. He was shielding the ball, winning it back, interceptions. He even later on, you could tell he was getting more and more confidence because he did one of those runs down the right-hand side that he sometimes does. And he got it. I thought he'd overhit it, but he kind of slid, got the ball, pulled it back to Richarlison. Richarlison had a shot blocked. But no, I thought Skippy was absolutely excellent. People forget, I think, because I haven't seen much of him and had some injury problems, you forget that this guy went to Norwich, was a dominant member of their title-winning team in Championship, played pretty much almost every minute of every Championship game. He was named in the Championship team of the season as well. And that was only, it'd have been 20 then, I think it'd have been Sarr's age. Look, I know it's very easy to write off like, they played for a lower league club or whatever, they played in the Championship, or Sarr was at Metz or whatever, playing in a, people always say these derogatory terms, especially about the French league, it's a farmers league and all this sort of stuff. But I tell you what, Skippy in the Championship, absolutely, under Daniel Farke's tutelage, he was his coach then, really would have helped shape his game and also the confidence he would have got and the rhythm from regular football week in, week out. Essentially, it's such a cliche, but he became a man. He kind of learned about the men's game really and what it takes to be a regular first team player. And also Sarr, likewise, he would have really been kind of hardened and toughened up by the experiences of playing for a team that is in relegation danger every single week and the pressure that comes with that and the mental strength you need to get beaten but still go back out the next week and try to turn things around. Ultimately, they weren't successful. They went down. But that, honestly, especially in the last weeks, he started about 2/3 of their games, maybe almost 75% of their games. And towards the end, he was absolutely one of their best players. And they kind of stood a real chance to keep staying up because of him. And others, to be fair, but he did play a big key role in trying to haul them back out of it at the end. It was just unfortunate right at the end they had PSG away on the final day. It was just or the penultimate day, I can't remember which it was. But yeah, his experience there will have absolutely made him. And it all leads to this night at the San Siro. I just think that's lovely. One comes from France, playing at a team at the bottom of the table. One essentially has kind of come via Norwich. Obviously had some good moments last season, well, before the injury. And they've kind of come together on the San Siro pitch. And here are the stats for you. So, despite being only 20, Sarr had more touches of the ball, 77, and played more passes, 59, than anyone else on the pitch. So you've got Tonali, who, yes, I think he's only 22 as well, but he is like an Italy international midfielder, absolutely heralded midfielder. But Sarr's were more involved with him. And to be honest, Skippy wasn't far behind. 65 touches and 55 passes. So Skipp had a pass success rate of 92.7%, which was higher than any other starting player on the pitch, barring Simon Kjaer. Kjaer? Please, some Danish person tell me how to pronounce that properly. He had 94. But other than that, Skippy was the second highest there. And it wasn't just that he was playing like short passes or anything. He was like spreading the ball out wide as well. Although I would say Sarr's pass success rate was 83.1%. He played one key pass. Skipp played two key passes. And Sarr also had 3 shots on goal and 1 dribble. Skipp completed 5 accurate long balls from his 6 attempts. Skipp managed to find teammates with 2 of his 4 long balls. And he also made 1 successful cross. And defensively, Sarr made 5 tackles and 1 interception. Skipp made 2 tackles, 1 interception and 2 clearances. And also, there were a couple of times when Sarr pinged these cross-field balls across It was so good. I remember one to Emerson and one to Perisic, who headed it down into the path of, I'm trying to remember who it was. But honestly, I just love the confidence that they both had. Sarr is just, it's such a football term nowadays, but he is a baller. He really is. He's going to be such a player. And Skippy, honestly, this was a big night for him, because I just think people maybe have forgotten how good he was before his injury. It's very easy. Whenever a player has an injury and then they get out of rhythm, you get all the whole bog standard phrases. He's just another Tom Carroll. He's another Harry Winks. All of this. He's no better than them. No, honestly, Mourinho really, really saw a lot in Oliver Skipp. Conte, to begin with, saw really a lot. I actually would say, I think Conte forgot how good Skippy could be. Or maybe, like we've seen, he's been a bit in and out of having minutes and rhythm, and maybe he hadn't quite found where he was meant to be. I do think he was being played in a weird kind of attacking role that was having him going down the right too many times as well. But I thought that was a big night for him. It really was. He spoke to BT Sport after the game. Said, I enjoyed every minute of it. Not the result we wanted, but there's a second leg to come and we're right in the game, so we'll take the positives. It's nice to make my debut from the start anyway. Playing in the Champions League is what you dream of as a kid. It wasn't the best start. I think after 10 minutes it was a goal and we didn't need to concede. Neither side created too many chances, I feel, but there's a second leg and something to come back from. And on repaying Conte's trust in them, he said, I think we would have delivered with a win, but me and Pape did well, and it's nice to have the manager's trust. Hopefully we repaid it. There were a couple of times when they were dangerous on the counter-attack, threats from forward runners. We had lots of set pieces into the box and created chances. It's only the first leg. We're still in it, and we know with our fans we can be a dangerous dangerous team at home. Do you know what? I think I've taken out some of the quotes there. There was definitely some quotes I remember seeing where he said that they did a lot of good things. He felt he and Pape Sarr, but they also got things that they both noticed that they could improve on, and that's absolutely key. Is recognising, is being proud of themselves because they should, but not resting on their laurels, and that's the sign of a top player. And talking of top players, although he had a bit of a tough night, Harry Kane said lots of good stuff about them afterwards. He said, I thought they were both outstanding, to be honest. It's not easy to come into the team. Two young players who've not got as much experience as some of the others, and to come into this sort of atmosphere and game and perform the way they did, they should be proud. We were fully behind them, and I think it's important that the older and more experienced players make them feel as comfortable as possible. The boss said before the game, we completely trust them and go out there and enjoy playing at the San Siro against one of the more famous clubs in the world, and they did that. They've been working hard. The players who haven't been playing have been working really hard. After the game, you see them running on the pitch, just waiting for opportunities. I'm sure they'll both be disappointed we lost, but they can be proud. They've got a lot of games coming up, and I'm sure they're going to play a lot more than they have been. They need to get ready for that. And I think it was an interesting point about Conte said very clearly to the team, we trust them. And I think you noticed out on the pitch, everyone was giving Sarr and Skipp the ball, and that's reflected in the amount of touches they had. Sometimes you get that. You get young players coming to the team and almost the senior pros are a bit like, no, I don't want to give it to them because they'll give it away. There was absolute trust in the ball retention and the usage of the ball of both Sarr and Skipp. And it was repaid, honestly. And Kane, it was really nice stuff, he said, actually. He said on Sarr as well, he went a bit deeper into both players. He said on Sarr, he's got fantastic quality. I think you saw today he was everywhere. He was breaking up play, tracking back, making tackles, shots, crosses. He's a player who has all the ability, and he'll only get better from experiences like tonight, playing a really good team, a really good midfield. We're happy with him. The boss trusts him. That's why he's playing, and we're going to need those type of performances for the rest of the season. And he also spoke about Skippy. He said, he's been great. Obviously, coming through the academy, he's just a really hard worker. Keeps his head down, works hard, quite shy, but just gets on with his job. He was really unlucky. When Antonio first came in, he was playing a big part in our team. He was playing games, looking good, looking solid, and then he got quite a big injury in his hip pelvis area. That set him back 3 or 4 months. And he's just been working hard, trying to get his time again and been waiting patiently. So I'm really happy he's done well tonight. He'll keep trying to improve, and that starts again on Sunday. I think I've always got the impression that Conte sees Skipp as the Højbjerg alternative. So I'd imagine it will be Sarr and Højbjerg at the weekend. But Skipp will get minutes. And this is this whole thing now. With Bentancur, we know will be out for a long time. And Basuma, like I say, 8 weeks it's meant to be roughly up to that, the kind of upper end of 7 to 8 weeks. But it could be more. And actually, Conte spoke about that afterwards. He said, oh no, that was me. Yeah, I asked him. This is how tired I am. I forgot I even asked that question, even though I think I said it at the start of the video that I did. He said, Conte said, I'm really happy about the performance from Skippy and Pape Sarr. Honestly, to play in this way in the Champions League and to play in the San Siro in this atmosphere, I think that normally it's tough for important players. But they played a really good game and I'm really happy. This type of performance makes me more relaxed for the future because we have to consider that we could finish the season with only 3 midfielders, Pape Sarr, Skippy and Pierre Højbjerg. He likes to leave out middle names and stuff. To have this type of performance makes me more relaxed because I know that I can count on these 2 players 100%. I'm really happy for them. And also he spoke about Basuma as well because the press picked up on the fact that he was kind of talking about to the end of the season with these 3. Oh, cannot afford to have any more injuries. And I think it was Tom Barkley from The Sun said, do you foresee that, Basuma's going to be out for the rest of the season? And he said, if you weren't aware, Basuma's had a stress fracture to his left ankle. He said about Basuma, he has a stress fracture in his ankle. I didn't need to say that, like it says in the quote. And when this type of situation happens, you never know how long a time he needs to recover. In my mind, in this moment, is to consider 3 midfielders. To have this type of performance from Skippy and Pape Sarr makes me happy because I have seen a lot of improvement in these players and it means we're working very well with them. It means they're improving and for sure they will be the future for Tottenham, but at the same time they will be the present. I have to consider them important players and with Pierre Højbjerg we only have 3 midfielders. Fingers crossed no injuries for the rest of the season and then we hope to recover before the end of the season Basuma, but we know about the situation. I'm not sure what's the future and whether he'll be able to this season. Yeah. If I'm going to have one gripe, it's what Conte says there, about players for the future, but also players for the now. My only gripe is I feel like he only sees them as players for the now because he has no other options. And that's a bit of a shame for me. Conte's a brilliant coach. You always hear me saying lots of positive stuff. I always point out little things that I feel like should be better because that's my job. That's what I'm meant to do. And that's, I guess that's what he does with players as well. Exactly the same. But yeah, that's my only thing is that it's taken this for us to see them. Look, I know Højbjerg and Bentancur have been very good and they've been the first choice partnership. And Basuma, yes, the big summer signing, I get it. But when you've got players like this who clearly are very talented young midfielders, I just feel like they could have got a bit more time overseas. I mean, Sarr didn't even play until after the World Cup, did he? Just because he came back and had a bit of time with Conte. And you're kind of thinking all those early months, I guess Conte could rightly say, hey, I was just working with him, developing him until the time was right. Could say that. But look, they're going to get lots of minutes now in the months ahead, which is going to be great. And I'm hoping that we look back at this time, like I said, as the period of where they were fortunate to get their chance, but they grabbed it and their careers really just hit a new level from here. That would be brilliant. Wouldn't it be wonderful if Spurs have an amazing end of the season and it was because these 2 young players became a bit of a linchpin in the team, rotating in and out with Højbjerg. It's a big ask, I know that. This is the biggest thing with young players. It's consistency is always the most difficult thing. But Skippy, everyone that I know that kind of would watch Norwich, I know it's a different level, but they would say that he was putting in like 8 out of 10 at least performances every week. So you never know. You never know. But they were the young players. And older players, not so good. Yeah, especially the attackers. Before the game, I was watching them doing drills out on the pitch. And what they were doing was, Skippy and Sarr were doing these really kind of fast-paced passes between each other. And then they were running through 3 scenarios after that. They would either knock the ball out wide to Perisic or Emerson. on the wings, and those two would cross it in for Son, Kane and Kulusevski to head in, volley in, whatever. Alfie Whiteman was the goal with his bright blonde bleached hair. That was scenario one. The other scenario was that Skipp or Sarr would play a quick ball through to Kane, who would turn shoot. The third scenario was that they would do the same thing, but Kane, instead of turning and shooting, would look to tee it up to Sonny, who would run onto it and try and curl into the goal. All well and good. None of it was used in the game. They didn't do any of that whatsoever. Whether that's a failing of the players or whether that's, I don't know. It did not happen whatsoever in the game at all. And you know what? The Italian media were really taken aback at how poor Spurs attack was. Because if you're looking from the outside, of course, Harry Kane, one of the most feared strikers in Europe, Son, one of the most feared attackers in Europe, Kulusevski has been, obviously, he's played in Serie A for Parma and Juventus, and he's made a massive impact in the Premier League. And then obviously you look at the bench, you've got Richarlison, Danjuma, Lucas. They could barely muster a shot on goal. So, the Corriere della Sera said Spurs were blunt and rusty. TMW wrote that going forward they created little or nothing and things did not improve as the match progressed. And you can't argue with any of that. And like I said earlier, they're two youngsters. So 21-year-old Malik Thiaw and 22-year-old Pierre Kalulu. Obviously Kiara in there as well, 32-year-old. But two youngsters, and Thiaw especially, he had Kulusevski in his pocket. He really did the whole game, dealt with him so well, with Hernandez as well. Kane, start with Kane. He tried to make things happen. He held the ball up. He took the hits. He always seems to do that, especially in Europe. Lets himself get really whacked around so they could get kind of free kicks. And like I say, got whacked in the face as well. But there's just something about the Champions League this season for Kane. Goals galore in the Premier League, but the Champions League is 1 in 7. Just hasn't really taken to the competition. He's got a couple of assists, but he'll want far more goals than that in this competition as well. Just didn't really work out for him. I thought Kulusevski was the poorest of the bunch, and I'm a big Decky fan. I had him in the press conference ahead of the game. What did I ask him? I asked him about Bentancur. I really like Kulusevski as a player, as a person. I find him fascinating. He's a very honest, entertaining guy to talk to. But on the on the pitch, obviously he's been, he was transformative for Spurs last year. However, I do feel like since the World Cup break, his contribution has really dropped off a cliff. He's had a couple of little moments where he's come alive, but I was looking at his stats. He's, after being a proper assist machine in 2022 and chipping in with goals as well, he's scored twice in 20 matches this season, and he hasn't registered a single assist in the Premier League since November. You remember he did, was it Liverpool and Leeds? I think the last 2 games. He came back and from his hamstring injury and had an assist in both. But just Tuesday night, absolutely in Thiaw's pocket. It just wasn't really good at all, which is a shame. But we're going to talk about it. It's one of those things where you've got all these other attackers. That's what they're there for. And like I say, Sonny on the other flank, another... Look, the only way to sum this up, you can't sum it up any better than the absolutely remarkable stat that last year's Golden Boot winner has only scored in 4 games this season. It's just, honestly, if you had told me if Sonny was going to do that this year, I would be stunned. Honestly, Sonny's such a good player. But just for some reason, this season, he has his moments where he looks like he's coming back, and he'll have a couple of games, maybe even a row, where he looks good, and it's just not sustained at all. Conte has gone from really getting the best out of Son last year, maybe that we've ever seen in the Premier League, to this year. He's going to be partly responsible, really, for probably seeing the bluntest version that we've seen of Son. We've seen the best, and I don't say worst, but maybe it is. But I think Conte obviously has to take a bit of responsibility for that as well, because I was looking at some of the data from last night, and that you can look at the average positions of where the players spent most of their time overall, and the average position of Sonny was like infield, quite deep. He was level with Emerson on the right, just over the halfway line, and wasn't too far ahead of Perisic. Whereas Kulusevski on the right was an advance of Kane, his average position. And that's no good for Sonny. Look, we know Sonny's at his best in two positions: when he's flying down the left-hand side, or when he's like a strike partner for Kane, or even Kane drops deep and he flies on past him. But right now, obviously, you've got Perisic as the man who's going down the left-hand side, and you've got Kulusevski is the one that seems to be running beyond Kane. So, yeah, Sonny's kind of his natural runs and the areas of going to, yes, people said this before, and I agree. I do think some of his natural positions and areas have been extinguished in a way. It reminds me slightly, I always say it in a joking way, that I think Sonny had a part to play in Dele's career kind of tailing off. And that's not saying that he was, bad Sonny or anything like that. It was the fact that Dele and Kane were this kind of strike partnership, and I always felt that Dele was at his best when he was playing in that role. And then Sonny came in and I guess was seen as an upgrade in that. And that kind of shunted Dele out to different positions, playing kind of slightly off the left sometimes. And I felt he never really recovered from that. His golden days, as it were alongside Kane. And I guess it'll be the same with Sonny, that, we know what his best positions are. And I think he's more versatile than Dele was. So he's got these two different roles kind of that he can really play in. But if he's not playing in them, it is tough for him. I do think he's got to take some responsibility. That sounds like I'm putting it all on Conte. That's not fair. I'm not saying that. I do think when you're a world-class player, and I think Son has the potential to be a world-class player, you've got to also grab games by the scruffy of the neck, wherever you're playing, whatever you're doing. But I just feel like his confidence is so low at the moment. He's being so careless in possession sometimes. We kind of, as the media, we're always, whenever Sonny gets the ball with his back to goal in the Spurs half, you worry about what's going to happen next. You could argue, why is he there? Should he be more advanced up the pitch? But, you'll see Kane come deep to get the ball, and you're less worried. He does give it away sometimes, as we've seen in a couple of recent games. But Sonny is just sometimes quite tamely will lose the ball. Obviously, he's not quite as physical a player as Kane, but still, like last night, it was a good example when he tries. What I think he tries to do is he tries to turn almost into trouble and thinks he can turn away when there's maybe two, possibly three players around him. And last night he was in such a position, he lost the ball. It was very quickly played up on a counter-attack. And Eric Dyer actually did a good sliding interception to stop the ball. I think he knocked it off for a corner. And he was so angry, Dyer. He slapped his legs, turned around, and really was shouting at Son as if to say, come on, like, you can't do that. And it's one of those, look, I've seen people, I think I mentioned it on Twitter, and people are like, oh, who's Dyer to say this? Dyer's been rubbish, all of this. I didn't think Dyer was that bad last night at all. I thought he was much better than he was at Leicester. Wasn't obviously as good. I thought he was very, very good against Man City. But look, it doesn't matter who it is. I don't think any player should escape criticism on the pitch from their teammates. Look, it's not like it's not being bullied or anything. It's very much saying you've got to be culpable. If you're going to make a mistake, you're going to get a bit of a rollicking from another player. And I think Kane should get exactly the same if he were to do something like that, and anyone else on the pitch should get that, because you just have to be better, and especially with someone like Sonny, who we know can be better because he's such a wonderful player. Actually, I should point out Eric Dyer misses the second leg as well. He got the I think it was the third yellow card out of the competition. It's mad that it doesn't get ruled out at the knockout stages, but there you go. I think it's the end of the quarterfinals. Yeah, actually, I didn't realise until I saw it earlier. Sonny's 60th European appearance for Spurs. Only Harry Kane was 75, Lloris was 70, Steve Perryman was 64, and Ben Davies was 64. Shows you, though, with Steve Perryman being in that list, how many more European games there are now. And that he's in there, having been at Spurs for so long, is quite an achievement. But yeah, obviously, he only becomes the, fifth player to have reached 60 appearances for Spurs in Europe. But just unfortunately, it was not a good performance. And look, I'll always say it, I think Sonny's got every right to be considered among some of the best players in Spurs history. But I just don't feel like this is the real Sonny that we're seeing this season. You know, we've seen little fits and bursts of goals. Was it Leicester, Frankfurt, Palace, Preston? But it's not igniting into anything more than that. And I think what the key thing for me to take away from all of that is I don't think Conte can afford to have both Sonny and Kulusevski misfiring at the same time. You shouldn't really have to get away with one. And that's why when kind of he's called on having this bigger squad and these more players, use them. Use these players. You know, you've got Danjuma. He scored 6 goals in the Champions League last season. Villarreal reached the semi-finals, didn't they? You've got Richarlison, who was a £60 million signing in the summer. You've even got Lucas Moura back now, who we know has had some very big nights in Europe. Yet, it's almost like Conte hopes that he'll just keep playing these players and they'll play themselves back into form. So what was the point of asking for a bigger squad if you're going to use them? I think there's this thing about Conte, isn't there? And this is what the fans, I think, will always seize upon, that I don't think this is what there is an intention, but he is a guy that I think makes subs later in games. It gives the impression that he's hoping things will change rather than trying to force them to change. And I think, obviously, when you've been used to, I suppose, someone like Mourinho, who you know is very proactive he'd sometimes change things at half-time. I remember, I think he took Eric Dyer off after like half an hour in one game, didn't he? In Europe. I think it was maybe his first European game with Spurs. But I remember all this with Poch. I remember Poch used to get... It's like, I think maybe it's the thing across all clubs. Maybe all fans, when things aren't going right, they're moaning at why it isn't changing. But to be honest, we were up there in the press box last night as well saying the same thing. It's like, they're losing. They're 1-0 down. Why is he not changing things? Especially when you've got these players on the bench. It's always around 70 minutes, isn't it, that he makes it. So Richarlison came on at 70 minutes. Danjuma didn't even come on. It was 10 minutes to go he came on. I don't know whether it's a loyalty thing to those players he really trusts. Or maybe the fact that Son and Kulusevski, he trusts them more in his very set system that they'll do the defensive work. You know, this, like I said earlier, this need to be compact before the attacking element, and maybe he worries that Richarlison and Danjuma are going to be more attacking than also defending version of things as well. I don't know, but it's not working. And the trouble is when you've got Kane who's being starved of service as well, it's a big old kind of vicious circle that you're not changing. You're just not. You've got a machine that needs different gears in it, and I'm not saying that they should be dropped and the other, and that's them out. I'm just saying, take one out for a match, take one out for 2 matches if need be. Just let them know that, look, you can't just keep putting in these performances that are not great at the moment and think you're going to play the next game. That's not what football's about. That's not what competition's about. That was what the whole point of getting a bigger squad was that these players would be pushed to be better because they knew that if they didn't, they were going to be replaced by other players coming in. And that's for everyone. That should be for Kane as well. If Kane went through a lean streak, and they felt that Richarlison should come in and play the role for a game or two, then absolutely that's what should happen. But it's not being put into practice. He did actually give a little quote. He said, I should also point out, these players that aren't playing then get dispirited and they also lose match rhythm, so when they come in, they don't look so good. I think Richarlison hasn't looked great when he's come in as well, and that's probably contributed to Conte thinking, maybe I don't want to start him. And Danjuma, he's just had a few moments and like little snatches and grabs of games to try and get used to the system. Yeah, that is one thing I find a little bit frustrating. And Conte said afterwards, if you ask me about specific players, I can answer you that some of them need to be more self-confident, especially when they attack. They need to recover their trust when it comes to dribbling and attack. I think generally speaking, they've been very determined. Now it is my task to show my players that I really trust them and rely on them. We need to try to improve. We need to improve and be prepared for the Premier League and the FA Cup and the second game against Milan. I think that's what it is. I do think there's an element of not taking risks with their passing. They're worried. But where does that come from? And again, that's on the coaching staff, I guess, to make them feel that you've got to go for it, because if you don't, that's when you'll be out. I think Conte's always said he prefers his players to be brave, so maybe he needs to be brave as a coach as well, perhaps. I don't know. So there's that. That was a bulk of the game stuff, although let's talk about the takeover stuff as well. Let's get that in now. So like I said earlier, another month, another financial stuff. We've had the QSI investment talk. We've had the financial results. And now, yes. So if you weren't aware, Financial Times put out a piece today. I think I saw it as I landed. Yeah, I think I saw it as I landed. That Iranian-American billionaire Jam Najafi, chair of MSP Sports Capital, are weeks away from approaching Spurs about a takeover bid. So the report suggests that such a bid would value Spurs equity at around $3 billion, which is £2.49 billion, before adding roughly $750 million, which is £624 million, of debt onto the club's books. And the bid is said to be structured so that MSP and its partners would put forward 70% of the purchase price, while backers from the Gulf, mainly from Abu Dhabi, would contribute the remaining 30%. So, from what I understand, I think the interest is genuine. Not that I'd ever doubt, like the Financial Times, obviously, a very respected newspaper or media outlet. So, yeah, that does seem to be genuine. Neither side have commented publicly in any way. But those I've spoken to inside Spurs, there's a denial that any approach has been made. And to be fair, that fits in with the fact that the report itself says weeks away from making some kind of approach. Look, if you ask anyone at Spurs for anything more public or on the record, they will say, there's no intention to sell and that they're looking to realise their long-term plans and ambitions. And that's what the thing would say. From what I understand, look, I think the big problem with that story mainly is in the figures involved. In terms of, what you're looking at there, 2.49 billion, and then adding 624 million as a debt on top as well. Look, Joe Lewis obviously has been long linked with selling Spurs in over the years. From what I understand, and this is something I've heard for the past 6 months to a year, I'd say, is that the value that has been people, within the club, those around Joe Lewis, and so they think internally the valuation is maybe even beyond £4 billion, which is $4.8 billion. So you're looking at a big old hike of those numbers from the report that would be required, far, far higher than in here from that approach. So yeah. And I think a key element as well is that people forget it's about the property. The thing that a lot of the fans obviously get wound up about, like the property FC and all this sort of stuff. But when it comes to stuff like this, that's a huge part of the sale, or any potential sale. So I looked it up. I had a little look through the financial records. In the last set of accounts, weirdly, for some reason, they only do land and building assets up to 2021. Maybe I don't know if there's a 2-year thing. I don't know. Maybe you don't have to be as up to date. But Spurs' land and building assets alone had a net book value of almost £1.2 billion as of 2021. And that's 2 years ago almost, give or take. So since then, the value of, don't forget, the stadium itself cost over £1 billion to build alone. You've got the training complex, the Lily-White House, the headquarters next to the stadium. There's loads of other properties down the high road. You've got the goods yard. You've got various places that Spurs own that will have naturally gone up itself in 2 years. But not only on top of that, you've also got the planned regeneration of the Tottenham area, and all the property prices for those things and everything is going to just go through the roof. So yeah, you've got to take that into account, that it could be anywhere up to, I don't know, 2 billion or something for their property. So you've got that as your starting point before you even think about the value of the club. And this is a club that we've just seen in the last financial accounts, 444 million revenue because that stadium is an absolute cash machine. So, I mean, you look at the figure, I think Chelsea went for 2.5 billion, but they don't have that kind of the assets to sell in terms of property as well. So that's why I think the figure would be that high. And also, there's some suggestions, and he's been knocking around for a while, people inside Spurs, other people around the club as well, that if Spurs were to sell, that Daniel Levy would maybe look to try and remain in some kind of capacity, whether it be short-term or long-term, I don't know, but would look to be involved in some capacity. It's one of those things, I've heard people say this before, you do wonder whether if he was in a situation where there was more money to spend, would he be better in that scenario? I don't know. He's often praised for some of the things he does in terms of financial stuff, but also obviously he's criticised for not going that extra yard. But maybe if there were deeper reserves to work with, would he be better? I don't know. Look, we know there's been frustrations. Of course there have. We see on social media all the time. We hear the chants in the stadium especially this year. Little protest that was outside. I say little, that's not meant to be disparaging. It was very noisy, but in terms of, it wasn't a huge protest. It was about maybe 40, maybe 50 at a push, people outside Hotspur Way as well. Because, for all the improvement off the pitch, all those things we talk about the stadium and I'd say the increase, I guess league position, of course, has gone up as well over the 20 years. Getting in the top four more regularly in recent years. But the stark thing staring you in the face is that single League Cup over a 20-year period. So, yeah, there's no getting around it that it's as a reign. I know he said in the financial report statement that, they've come so close, they've been in finals, they've been in so many semi-finals, and they can't be responsible for what happens actually on the pitch. You kind of can. I guess, by giving a better quality of player to be better in those positions when they get into them. But what I would stress, and I found this quite interesting, because obviously people that want a change in ownership are immediately going to seize on anything like this and say, yes, please. But these same people that call it or believe that the club is more interested in their property portfolio than they are in the football club. There was a really interesting line that I saw in the Financial Times report, which said about the approach from MSP. Said the Najafi-led group's interest in the club extends to real estate and development rights that are available through its ownership. So if you think the new people can come in and go, it's all about the football, lads, I don't think that's going to be the case. It sounds like, that is also a very attractive part of the whole proposition. But yeah, so there you go. So that on top of the QSI stuff as well. I think I reported back then that Spurs, from what I understood, have spoken to a few different interested parties about investment as well. So it'd be interesting. I think I said, was it about a year ago? I said that this coming out of the pandemic period was going to be peak value time. And that was the kind of the feeling as well, that if Spurs were going to sell, it would be during this peak value period when everything starts to pick up again. But then I guess maybe the thing I kind of touched on there has made me think, actually, as I'm saying it, I do wonder whether the regeneration of the Tottenham area, would it be an even bigger kind of asset to sell when all that starts to come in? And I know some people won't want to hear that, but I just wonder whether going the investment angle now, so that boosts your cash reserves that you can use to compete against these mega rich clubs, but don't actually sell the club. We'll find out. We'll find out in the weeks ahead whether Najafi's interest actually does become an approach, as is being touted. Sometimes these things, there's definite interest, but it doesn't come to anything. And sometimes, something actually does happen. I would say that normally, and this is in all, I've seen this in other businesses as well, not just football, when there's a lot of noise made, and oh, this is all being prepared. Often that's the one that doesn't happen, and sometimes the takeover that actually does happen is like a bang, suddenly, wow, that suddenly happened. Okay, like within 48 hours, things accelerate very quickly. Sometimes when there's a lot of noise about it, there's maybe something else to it. I mean, it may just be that they are interested. They're trying to whip up support for it, put some pressure on the current owners, and maybe bring the price down. I don't know. I don't think Spurs are like that, so I can't imagine that tactic would work. Or I don't know. Or maybe they're trying to flush out another club. I think they were interested in Everton as well. So unless there's that, I don't know. Honestly, it's just spitballing, speculating. It could end up being something, it might not. But it definitely seems to be some interest there. And like I say, Spurs will always say that they're not up for sale in any way, shape or form. But like I say, I've always, in the last 6 months to a year, I've heard of this valuation of over 4 billion. So we'll see. Last little bits I was just going to mop up before I head off. I really don't want to make this an hour and a half, but we're heading towards it. I don't want it to be that long, just for your sake and mine, because I might just suddenly nod off if you haven't already. Just back to Conte and Romero, I wanted to finish on. I really want to make it clear, because the one thing I know of, there's little bits and pieces that I'll criticise about Conte, despite the fact I do think he's a brilliant coach. I do. But what I would say is, I've seen people criticising, like, on the touchline, doesn't look like he cares anymore. Conte is not in a good way at the moment, in terms of he's not physically back to full health. And I've seen it. I've been up close to him in Milan in his first couple of press conferences back. He doesn't look as fit and healthy as he has been in the past. And, this is a guy who is in like peak physical condition. He has been, and he looks like a guy that has been going through some tough stuff in the last week or two, and a bit of a shock in his life, I think, as well, with everything that happened. So, I mean, he admitted it himself. I've got the quotes for you. He said, "Frankly speaking, the previous match against Leicester, I was completely out. I've just had surgery, and after 2 days, my doctor told me I couldn't go. I couldn't make the effort. So in the previous match, I was distant from the pitch. Christian was there replacing me. I was able to share my ideas with the team. He really helped out a lot." Essentially, Christian Celine was doing all the shouting from the touchline, and Conte was more withdrawn, essentially, in his seat. And then he says, "I was wearing a medical device in that period, and that medical device was a post-operative stomach support," we were told afterwards. "But I was still able to interact in a fair enough way with the team. I was not 100% for my physical shape, but in the next game I will be fit, and I'll try to give my contribution." So yeah, he has not been his right self at the moment, and he hasn't. And hopefully we'll see a little bit more of that. The more and more he recovers, because Spurs do need his fire. I think they do. I think when he is in full cry on the touchline, I think they have to respond to him. One player who maybe could do with their fire being diluted. No, you can't dilute fire, can you? Turn down a bit. Is Christian Romero. He just needs to cool it slightly. He struggled against Milan. He did. He was beaten twice by Hernandez in two big moments. The first one was the goal. The second one, he just got skipped by so easily, but he was quite lucky that the cross deflected off. And then he did a big old late lunge, another one that got him a yellow card. That's now 7 yellow cards in 7 games, if you count in the 2 that brought the red, that saw him banned against Leicester, at Leicester. Suspended for Leicester, sorry. It's like his aggression. It's both his gift and his curse. It's like a superhero thing. It makes him a really good front foot defender. And honestly, when he's not there, Spurs miss him. This was the Serie A defender of the year before he joined the Spurs. He is a very good defender. And just reminded me, someone sent me a clip today. Apparently someone went on Talk Sport. I think it was after the game. I think we were waiting in the press conference, and someone after went on Talk Sport and name dropped me as someone that blow smoke up Romero's backside was the expression. But he's not that good. He's a liability, apparently, which made me chuckle. I've actually been quite critical, I feel, of Romero in recent weeks. I even asked Delaney about him the other day because I expect much more from him. I do think he can be a terrific defender. I mean, he's a World Cup winner and he kind of got better and better as that World Cup went on, and we've seen him at his best. But he just needs to curb this aggression that he has. He's done it in previous seasons. He did it for Atalanta as well. And he did it in the first season of Spurs, where he just picks up card after card. Those 7 yellow cards in 7 games have all come after the World Cup. Before that, he wasn't racking up yellow cards like that. It's almost like he just needs to be told, no, bad boy, kind of thing. Like it's a dog or something. Because, Conte last year did similar. He just said, he was getting really close to being banned. I think he was getting close to the 10-game mark, a 10 yellow card mark, so he would have got a 2-game ban. And Conte just said publicly in a press conference, no, he has to stop that. He can't. He's got to understand that he needs to be there for the team. Didn't get another yellow card. Got through, didn't get the ban and everything. And it feels like that needs to almost be said again because it's obviously he's got this red card. And they can't afford to lose him in games. He just needs to make this daft tackle almost every game. I know some people love it. Oh, he's leaving his mark. He's letting him know he's there. It sets the tone. Well, it sets the tone if he gets a red card as well. And sometimes these tackles are so borderline. You get a bit of a fussy ref or VAR and he's going to get sent off again, which is something that, to be fair to him, he hasn't done much. But I just feel like he's almost getting a little bit more reckless with them. And he doesn't need to be because he's such a good defender. Yeah, actually, that reminds me. In the summer, Conte told us as well that he wanted him to have a cold head. A hot heart and a cold mind. That was it. And when I asked Delaney about Romero last week, he said the main thing for him is the timing of the challenges. He said he wants to keep the aggression, but they need to, as coaches, teach him how to get those timing right for those tackles. And yeah, he'll sort it. They'll sort it out. They'll get him fixed. Because he's just too good, honestly. He is. I'm blowing smoke up his backside now, aren't I? But honestly, nights like last night, hopefully a bit of a wake-up call for him. A little bit of a little reminder of, okay, we want you to be confident, but not overly confident, because that's what leads to things like that. He had a poor night, but he can bounce back from it. West Ham's going to be a biggie, because they're going to wind him up. He's had some clashes with West Ham players in the past. Chelsea the next week, we know he's also had some clashes with them. Was it Cucurilla's hair almost got pulled off as well? So these are 2 games when I think they're going to target that aggressive side of him, and it's about how he responds. He needs to maintain his focus. Talking of focus, I do think a few Spurs fans would like Antonio Conte to just focus purely on talking about Spurs. That's definitely been a little thing. We know what he's like. He's going to make it clear quite a lot, if ever he's asked about his future, that it's undetermined and there's a decision to be made. He doesn't like to pass up opportunities to talk about a future beyond Tottenham, maybe. The pre-match press conference was pretty much an ode to Italian football. It really was. It was a strange press conference. They locked most of us outside the press conference room until it had already started. I don't think it was deliberate. I think it was a miscommunication between stewards and the press people. But yeah, it was a complete and utter mess of a press conference. But there was a lot of it was about the difference in cultures between the Italian and English game, and essentially how in Italy everyone just talks about football constantly. There's so much pressure and all that, and it makes you stronger. And it was like I love Italian football kind of thing. And then it was a bit of a setup, but an Italian journalist last night essentially asked him what it felt like to be back in the San Siro, and whether he enjoyed it, and whether he would come back to work in Italy. And whether Conte, because he was talking his native tongue, maybe forgot for a moment. We all had headphones in where we were listening to the translation. I don't know. But here's what he said. So he said, Playing here in the San Siro as a player and a manager is special. It's unique. The San Siro is a historical stadium. It's a beautiful one. It's always packed with people. It's full. I love the fact whether it's Milan or Inter, the stadium is always crowded. It's very good for Milan, the stadium, and I'm pleased for both groups of fans. Today, this is a beautiful setting for playing against us. The Milan supporters were singing all the time, and it's evident they were the 12th man tonight. This will be helpful with us when we play the second leg. And then he talked about the returning to work in Italy. I prefer to live in the present. I don't want to think about the future, but you perfectly know that as an Italian man and the former Italy manager, Italy is in my heart, and Italy will always stay there. I will never exclude the possibility that I will be back here one day. Who knows? So look, he was just being honest. He wasn't also saying, oh, next week I'm coming back to manage in Italy. He was talking about a distant future. I remember Poch saying something about that, about Spain once, that one day he'd like to go back. Sometimes players do that. You know, Lloris, I think, has kind of hinted he'd like to go back to France one day. And Lucas obviously said Brazil one day. So it's not unknown. And obviously we know his situation, Conte with his wife and daughter back in Italy. It's not rocket science that he probably would like to go back there in the, at some point. I just think that maybe right now, with some fans potentially a bit on the at a turning point of where some are starting to get a bit frustrated with the team and they're turning those frustrations towards Conte, I do kind of feel like it would be best now if he just avoided questions like that. So if he was asked that question, he could have just said, like, I'm fully concentrating on my job at Tottenham. And at this point, I'm not thinking about anything beyond that. That's it, just for now. Just go with that for now. Go away and do your summer interviews that he often does with Italian media and say things that probably make Spurs go, oh no. But just in these moments while the season's still going, just, you know, it's a big thing in the pre-match press conference about stability and how, you know, Spurs really suffer from a lack of stability. Yes, well, part of that stability is not knowing whether your manager's going to be there next season. And it's like, don't add to that with more quotes. Like, I'm a journalist, so of course I want to hear these quotes and stuff like that. But even I can appreciate, no, just don't do it. And this is the issue. It's like talking to some of the fans on the way back and hearing their frustrations at things. And it's like, you can understand the vision that's been sold to you if you can see the path and where it's leading to. And this, whether this relates to Levy and Enoch, whether this whether this is regards to Conte, it's fine. You can believe in something if you can understand where it's heading. And this is the thing with Conte at the moment, is the fans aren't enjoying watching the team as much right now. And, you know, he needs to, he needs to show that. I think he needs to just get the team playing good football. And he did it last season. This is the thing, that he had them playing really good football last season. Towards the end, they won, I can't remember the number now, something like 14 matches towards the end. Or was it 10 and 14 matches? I can't remember what it was. But they absolutely were firing all the cylinders. They looked like a big team. They were playing good football, scoring lots of goals. And look, the fact that he came back and defied the doctor's advice, came back to try and lead Spurs to success, it shows that he is still motivated. He is still buying into what he's doing at Tottenham. And I do feel that a lot of this kind of, oh, he looks like he doesn't want to be there, I think it's just because he feels absolutely rubbish right now. I don't think he's like the full kind of Conte right now, the full Conte. Honestly. So let's see what comes ahead. Big matches coming up. Like I say, London derby against West Ham, who really have started to improve. They've lost one of their past 7 games. They're starting to really kind of become a lot more solid. And then we've got Chelsea, of course, to come to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium with their £323 million worth of January signings. They will start to improve as well. But I also think there's a free week between the West Ham and the Chelsea game. That's big for Conte and the coaches on the training pitches as well. But what I would also say is there's going to be a bit of pressure because these are 2 matches at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, 62,000 fans. They want to be entertained. They've got 2 derbies. Obviously, they've seen Spurs lose against Arsenal. They don't want to have a London derby at their stadium and lose it. or even I think they want to see 2 wins. Of course they will, and I think these 2 games will be a very good barometer of probably the direction of the season and also the mood of the Spurs fans. Come out of this with some good results and performances, and I think you go into then what is a load of games or more games against the bottom 8, and suddenly I think things go in the right direction. Come out of it with some poor performances, struggle to score, not looking very confident. I just feel that mood's going to start to swing even further. And we don't want that. We don't. So there you go. I think that's everything I was going to cover. Not made the 1 hour and 30 minutes, thankfully, for everyone. It's going to be 1 hour and 20, which I know isn't a lot less. But yeah, so we've got, I think the press conference is going to be Friday ahead of the Sunday game. We actually haven't had the email yet telling us when it is. But I presume it'd be Friday. Otherwise, we'd have been told by now if it was Thursday. Yeah, so I shall do one of these probably Monday, unless something major happens in the next couple of days, and we'll mop up what happened against West Ham. So there you go. I'm going to go and, first off, I'm going to have dinner with my wife because I missed our wedding anniversary, which happened to be Valentine's Day, which was such a great idea at the time, thinking I was being clever and romantic. But then Spurs, 19 years later, go and decide to have a Champions League match on that night. So we're going to go and have dinner. So I'm going to head off. And as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.